Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast. This is Hank Garner, your host, and each week I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. I'm very pleased this week to have with me as my guest Hugh Howey, author of Wool and Sand. He was in South Africa this week as I was recording this, and we had a couple of audio problems as Skype dropped out a few times, including right at the beginning of the show. But all you missed is the brief introduction, which I'm giving you now, and we will pick up with Hugh telling us a little bit about how he became a writer and his love of reading when he was a youngster. Thanks for listening. You can find all of the episodes at hankgarner.com. Also on YouTube, there's a link there, and we're now on Stitcher Radio. Links to everything in the show notes and on the sidebar at hankgarner.com. Now on to Hugh Howey.
Awesome that you're reading. Reading is so good for you, and I'm, 4 or 5 years old, and that's so impressionable. Hearing people say, "Well, that's an awesome thing," and it's made me real sensitive to like what we praise kids for. Like you can really enough people saying the right thing at the right time can push kids down one path or the other, and I think that's probably what happened with me. It was something I enjoyed, and I got praised for it, and made me want to do it more. And the more you do something, the more you enjoy it, and I became the kid who was walking around the book all the time.
Yeah, and having parents who recognize that and place things in our path sure helps. I know my wife and I have tried to do that with our kids, and yeah, you can't make a kid read, but you sure can leave clues and hints, and you can try to pad the atmosphere, as much as possible.
Yeah, and you definitely want to be in an environment where your parents or your peers appreciate things that are going to make you a better human being. My mom was a school teacher, and my dad was a farmer and grew up with a real solid background and was one of the first in his family to go off to college. So they both had an appreciation for education. But I think parents just, I don't know, you learn that you try your best, and like you say, you only have so much control.
Right. And you said that you started writing, a whole bunch of novels, and I think a lot of writers are that way. A lot of people can write a first chapter, and they can write a ton of first chapters, but it's getting, through that barrier and the pushing forward that separates the writers from wannabe writers. What was it for you that made you dig in and finish your first novel?
I think I finally absorbed enough story, not just novels, but TV shows, comic books, film, to understand that every scene has to tell a story, and every scene has to move the plot forward and be exciting. Every single chapter needs a beginning, middle, and end. And I think the beginning scenes have that really easily when we're introducing characters and they're presented with the conflict, and then there's some kind of cliffhanger or suspension at the end. And I think writing that first chapter is really easy to do because we're powered through that. And then the second chapter, we're not sure what to do. We've just done a beginning, middle, and end, and now we just want to kind of muddle the characters forward to the big finale at the end of the story. And it took for me learning that every single chapter needed to be a self-contained story of sorts, and that keeps you from getting bored and feeling uninterested in the story. And I think I see that a lot in books, even from some writers that I admire. Like you can just tell there's kind of some throwaway chapters in there that they weren't invested in or didn't have an idea of what that chapter was going to do to power the plot along or develop the characters. So yeah, with the first novel that I completed, I saw each day as like, okay, today's a day I'll write this chapter, this scene, and it was almost a scene that could stand alone on as a short story if it needed to, and that helped me get through to the end. But that's my recommendation to people having a hard time finishing a novel is stop thinking of it as a novel and think of it as a collection of short stories, and then you'll be able to tackle each chapter with vigor.
Speaking of short stories, we seem to be in a kind of a renaissance time for short stories. There's and surely, Kindle publishing has enabled some of this, that now there's a marketplace for those. So now there are more to be bought because now there's a way to easily get a hold of them without waiting for, some big publisher's anthology to come out each year or something like that. What do you think about that? I know you've published several shorts, and then some of your shorts have then become novels. But how do you tell when you're writing the story if this is going to be a short story, or if this story needs more to keep going? How do you make that decision?
I know that, I think, before I sit down to write the work. I can usually guess pretty closely how many words it'll take to tell a story, within 10 or 15%. So yeah, I mean, I don't ever sit down and just start writing a first scene and then have no idea if this is going to be like a novel or a short story or a novelette. I have an idea of that before I go in, because I kind of have the general, like most of the scenes in my head, the general plot arc in my head. Now, what I'm not sure about is I might finish that story that I have in mind to sit down and write, and then there'd be more in that world to tell, and then it can grow into something bigger. But as for wrapping up that project and publishing something, I always have a really good idea of about the size it's going to be.
And that's what happened with Wool, isn't it? That it was originally just a short story, but people were asking for more from that. Will you kind of tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, it was bizarre because it's going to be a bit of a spoiler here, but everyone at the end of the story is dead, so
right.
I have no idea what people were asking for. You want more of that? Like his bones are still right there.
Right.
But it was I think a world that people were really captivated by, and these certain rules that people lived by that they felt like they needed maybe more time with to fully grasp. So, a lot of people asked for more in that world, and I was happy to expand it. Interestingly, that, I mentioned Ender's Game earlier. That was a book that really influenced me, and that started off as a short story that called The Battle Room that Orson Scott Card wrote, and I think won a Hugo for it. And, he saw that it did really well and expanded that into a novel, and the same was true of Fahrenheit 451. And some of Asimov's work started off as shorts. So there's kind of a history of science fiction of exploring an idea and then having the fandom say, we really like that idea, we want more of that, and then the author obliging.
What was your process like so you put Wool out and people start going nuts over it, it starts selling a bunch of copies and people start asking for more. How long did that process take for you to go, okay, people are wanting more, and then you actually, get a plan together to start doing that?
Well, as soon as I started seeing the reviews come in and people emailing me asking if there was going to be more in that world, I started thinking about, okay, this is a challenge. Like, what kind of story would I tell, and how would I flesh this world out? I had to start daydreaming up a much bigger plot. But it wasn't until the end of October, with National Novel Writing Month looming, that I started thinking about dropping the book that I was outlining for NaNoWriMo and doing more of Wool instead. So it ended up being November 1st that I decided to tackle Wool Part 2. That was back in 2010.
And did you have the whole series planned out when you decided to take it there? When you plan a serialized work, do you plan out the whole story arc ahead of time and then kind of know where the different serial chapters will begin and end? Do you have a process for doing that?
Yeah, I kind of look at it like a season. If I'm doing a serialized work, I think of it as a season of TV, and so you plot out your episodes, and what's the overall goal, or where do you want the character to end up at the end of the story, and what's changed about them? What do they realize? What do they overcome? What's their plot arc? And so that's the big arch. You kind of draw that. And then under that, you can draw a whole bunch of little humps. And each one of those can be, if you think of, like a TV show like Firefly, each episode they, were smuggling something, or they were getting involved in a local civil war on a planet. There's something going on there that they're going to wrap up at the end of that story. But then there's something that they're not going to resolve, like, two characters' unrequited love or something like that. And it takes a new turn. It moves, their romance moves a little farther forward. And that might be the overall plot arc that you're developing. So you want to know both of those things. And for me, I don't heavily plot my stories. I don't go scene by scene, but I do think that going into it, just sitting down to write, is doing yourself a disservice. I think you can make a much better story if you take some time to try to think about your characters and craft some intricacy in what the plot's going to do for those characters. And I see it like putting a crossword puzzle together. Like, you just want things to fit together neatly and be satisfying and have all kinds of cool foreshadowing and themes. So that's how I approach it. And maybe that's more involved than other people want to get with their writing. But for me, it keeps me interested in my writing, and I think it produces a better product at the end.
And when you sit down to write each day, it kind of gives you an idea of what I need to be accomplishing today. And I know it does for me when I'm not a heavy outliner, but I do like to know some story beats, some things that I'm going to hit, or else I'll wind up just staring at the screen and surfing Facebook and crap that I know I shouldn't be doing. But it definitely helps to keep your mind engaged, so you can keep the reader engaged for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you decided to. What was the first work that you published on KDP?
That would have been Molly Fight and the Persona Rescue back in 2009.
And how did you?
It's like a young adult space opera.
Okay. And how did you come to the decision to self-publish that? Was that the book that you had with a small press originally?
Yeah, I got the rights back to that. Matter of fact, I'm not sure which one I did first, if I did book 1 or book 2. I may have self-published book 2 on KDP, The Land of Light, before I got the rights back to the Persona Rescue, but they were like within weeks of each other, I think. Just had gone through the experience of publishing with a small press, and I saw that the tools that they were using to publish were available to me, and that I was going to be the one driving all the sales anyway. So why wouldn't I just do a little extra work and retain ownership of my artwork, and be able to control pricing and make more of the retail price when I did land a sale. And it's just, I didn't see the benefit really of being with a small press. I could see if I was with a big publisher, that's a different consideration, because they can get you bookstore distribution and pay a bigger advance and other stuff. But later I would see that self-publishing didn't have any ceiling either, so didn't make sense once I started getting offers from big publishers to do some of those deals.
Now, in 2009, when you made that decision, self-publishing still had a sort of a stigma. It wasn't like it is now, where that's very few people look at self-published authors with the same disdain that they used to. Did you have any qualms about that at all, or did it just completely make sense to you from the beginning?
No, I had such low expectations of my writing career, and also I was writing science fiction. So anybody who was snobbish about publishing path was probably going to be snobbish about my genre anyway.
Right.
So I didn't care. I was working in a university setting where college professors were writing literary stuff that had wonderful flow and absolutely no substance, and they had never been outside of the university setting, so they were writing about being college professors falling in love with students and stuff like that. And to me, I thought what I was doing was a lot more, I don't know, noble than writing literary fiction that no one really cared about reading. So I've always been confident about what I'm doing, and at the same time, very low expectations of having a writing career. I kind of knew how hard it was for people to make a living as a writer, so I didn't think I was like closing myself off from going off to be the next J.K. Rowling. I didn't have that kind of, I don't know, that wild optimism, which I think people, if you do that, then you're not going to become a billionaire writing. I kind of knew that the chances of becoming a billionaire writing were slim anyway, so just wanted to make my works available.
And you became a vocal proponent of self-publishing, and your blog uh, became or has become a stopping point for a lot of new authors to gain your insight into how things went for you, but also a lot of motivation. I know you were one of the first authors that I found when I came to self-publishing, and man, it's uh, such a wonderful thing to find a voice of reason that will shoot straight with you and tell you, exactly where your expectations will be, but also the encouragement to, keep plugging away at it, even if, immediate success doesn't come, that there is an arc that you can, find in your writing and in your career. Um, how did you become kind of the voice of a generation of self-publishers, and did you accept that mantle easily or with some trepidation?
Oh man, I never wanted to be, I've always wanted my works to be enjoyed. I've never wanted to be a figurehead for anything. When I published the first couple of years I was doing this, Amanda Hawking was the one that everyone talked about, and I remember thinking like, man, I am glad that she's shouldering that burden, so that nobody else has to, because that must be tough for everyone to talk about you instead of just talking about your works. I'm sure she was like, man, just like buy my books and discuss those. Um, but you don't really. I don't think you get to completely choose some of the things that happen to you like that. I was put into a situation where I made some decisions and deals that got attention, and I was sharing my thoughts on stuff just to my handful of readers, and people started asking me questions about why I would choose to turn down this offer, or why I would publish this way. And I would just answer honestly, never said no to an interview. And then one thing led to another. But it's, a situation where they were asked, what was it like? And then the rest just would come down to just the answers that they gave and how outspoken they were, and whether or not their answers resonated with other people. For me, I also felt a bit of a moral imperative, knowing that people had warned me not to self-publish, and looking at the success I had way before I had big financial success, but the success I had in reaching readers and finding satisfaction with my writing and growing as an author because I was getting feedback and making works available. I saw that these people were completely wrong, that there was absolutely nothing about self-publishing that was going to hold me back, and that the opposite was true, that if I didn't have self-publishing, I probably would have given up on my writing. And so I wanted to counter some of the just really, really factually incorrect things that people were saying about self-publishing. And I felt like there wasn't enough people out there standing up against that stigma. And if anything I've said is like convinced, one or two people to publish rather than give up on writing, then I'm glad for every bit of energy that I put into that blog and speaking my mind, because that to me is what it's all about. We should be encouraging more people to engage in artistic pursuits, not trying to beat people down and scare them out of it.
One of the most fascinating aspects of your story that I've always been intrigued by, when Wool took off, you were working at a bookstore, weren't you?
Yeah, I'd been at the bookstore for a little over 2 years at that point.
And I've heard you talk a little bit here and there about the concept of living simply. And I know that when you were in Florida, you had a small house, and uh, when you were writing Wool and really before the big crescendo of that book taking off, you were and correct me if I'm wrong, but the the idea that live as simply as you can so that you don't require as much and you can give more attention to the things that you love, or like writing or whatever it might be. Would you like to talk about that a little bit? I've always found that fascinating, and that this idea of stepping back from acquiring all the stuff and that giving us the freedom to do what we love.
Yeah, I think people, if you want to make a living with a creative endeavor, knowing how difficult it is to make money doing that, the other side of the equation that you can't control is how much you're spending to live life. And for me, that there are a lot of little decisions I can make to really give myself the freedom to concentrate on my writing instead of having to work, two jobs to support me and my partner. And it was a happy byproduct that making those decisions also made me happier. I chose to do things like go on hikes. That was what we did for fun, was to take the dog and go hike up a mountain, and it was completely free, instead of an expensive hobby or something. Lived in a very, very small house, and every house that we lived in, the house in Boone was our third house. Every house we lived in, we put a lot of sweat equity into them, fixed them up, did well when we sold them, and then instead of getting bigger houses, just kept downsizing until we owned a house outright. And looking back on how much work went into that and how many sacrifices we made, it was hard. It's not like you can just tell someone, just do this, and then it's easy. It's going to be very, very difficult, which is why very few people do it. But if you want to have a career doing something that you love, there are ways to make that more likely. And one of those is to really think about what's important to you and not try to keep up with the neighbors, but forge your own path and try to live as simply as possible.
Which brings me to a new series that you're publishing, the Wayfinding series. That's a bit of a departure from your other work, but I've been picking them up and they're fascinating. What brought about the desire to start publishing some nonfiction?
Well, it's interesting. I've been publishing nonfiction for 5 or 6 years. I've been doing it on my blog, and it's been more unstructured, and a lot of it's been about publishing stuff. But also I've written a lot of philosophy and kind of self-help stuff, kind of more autobiographical self-help stuff, like not me preaching the answers to people, but saying like, hey, this is something I wrestle with and how I try to deal with it. So I've been doing that for a while. It's just never been easy to find all that stuff in one place. And everyone's been interested in my upcoming sailing trip, and so I needed a way to write about that. And I didn't want to just do a straight-up travelogue, so I thought of combining the two and creating a series that looked at all the stuff that I'm interested in as a reader. I read mostly nonfiction, and I want to consolidate what I feel like I'm learning in one place, and also put in life experiences, and then also my travel experiences. So it was always part of the plan, when I took off sailing, to write something like this. It's the name of my boat, Wayfinder, is tied into this series. So it's been something I've been working on and thinking about for quite a few years, actually, before I even started writing fiction. When I would dream, when I was a failed novelist, I would lay in bed at night and dream about having written nonfiction works like this. That was what I thought I would do if I had the fortitude to actually sit down and finish what I wrote. So this is kind of an older ambition than even my fiction.
what's the philosophy behind wayfinding?
So wayfinding is a term it's had several meanings now, but the original term is the way seafarers used to navigate, looking at natural signs. They could look at cloud formations and the direction of the swell. The sea temperature could tell them something. Fish and bird migration patterns, the stars, all of that. These were all these signs in the natural world that help them navigate. And as a self-help philosophy, it just it's evolutionary psychology mixed with God, I don't want to, it's mostly evolutionary psychology, just with a little bit of philosophy mixed in. And the idea is that we have all these natural signs around us of how we're feeling and how our body is responding to anxiety and stress and things like that. And we're not really in tune to them. We kind of live just like you can no longer see the stars to navigate by because of all this light pollution. We now have so much noise and static in our life from all the screens we're staring at all day, and living in a modern world that our bodies weren't designed for. It's hard to be in tune with these signs that could help us navigate through life a little bit better. So for, over 20 years, I've been trying to get more in tune with those signs and figure out like why I seem to not have as much free will as I want, and how do I exercise more free will, and how do I make myself a better person and happier and more satisfied. I've picked up some tricks along the way, a lot of reading and a lot of experimentation, and that's kind of what I'm distilling into this wayfinding series.
And you've gotten really personal, especially in the last couple that you released. Was that difficult for you to kind of expose yourself and your, some of the things that you, are dealing with in life? And is that when for fiction authors who are used to, writing make-believe stories, but we always insert a little bit of ourselves here and there, and it's we're the only ones who can really tell that. But it's a very different thing to write nonfiction and say and to address yourself in these. Is that a difficult switch, a transition to make?
It's not easy, but I wouldn't say it's too difficult. I am in a really good place emotionally and philosophically right now, and I'm also in a I used to be a lot more sharing like this. People who know me know that like you can get to know me pretty quickly. Love finding out about people and asking probing questions and sharing in return. And I don't know, just trying to be live in the moment, be really in tune to life. But when my career took off, if I said something that was meant sarcastically, or people who knew me knew that this was something not to take literally, other people who don't know me would seize on that and just go crazy over something. Or if I shared something personal, I would find out like 6 months later that someone was, going to throw that back in my face, and I learned to be more guarded. And so that was more of a recent phenomenon. And I haven't enjoyed that. I really enjoyed more being able to just put on my blog whatever I wanted and not worrying about the consequences, and dealing with criticism and negative reviews and things that I never had to deal with in a public sphere toughened me up to the point that now I feel comfortable with myself, and I don't worry about people's reactions, and I can feel like I can get back to a person that I was before, where I was a lot more open and sharing. And it's hard to be curious and inquisitive without offering up your own insights. So I want to learn from other people, and expecting people to share emotional tidbits with me without me opening up to them is unfair. So it's not so much wanting to be on display as wanting to have a dialogue with people. And I've missed that. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm getting a lot of great emails from people who are reading the series and they're telling me how it's impacting them, and either corroborating what I'm saying by sharing their experiences or just opening up. And I love it. It's I wish we had more of that in life.
I know that we've all seen celebrities who it seems like they scratched their way to the top and did everything they could to become famous, and then once they were, you see that these people are pleading for their privacy and pushing the world back away from them, and it's easy for us on the outside to say, well, they're just spoiled brats. They wanted all this fame and now they have it. They want to be left alone. I don't really think that's what it is. I think people don't know how to handle criticism. And when people are thrust into the limelight and now all of a sudden people can say whatever they want with no fear of repercussions or anything, especially in the internet age where people can just go on Amazon and write anything that they want as a review, and there's no accountability, and there's no, there's no one to hold them accountable for their actions. Can you give any advice to writers as to, when you start getting a little exposure, and then you start having to deal with negativity and criticism, and like you said, people that take things that you say and either take them out of context or save them for ammunition against you later? How do you learn to deal with that?
I think it's something everyone has to kind of go through to figure out that these things that feel like they're going to really affect your life and your career aren't, and you just can't believe that. You can't believe that anyone has gone through it the way you feel like you're going through it, and these things that are kind of working against you are going to really affect your life, and then you realize that you survived them, and they're not going to affect you that much, and you learn not to react to them so harshly. And people can tell you that. It's just like a parent can tell their child, like, these are the mistakes you're going to make, and the kid is yeah mom or yeah dad, whatever, you're old. They don't realize that they were kids and did the exact same thing. And so, like, every generation kind of has to go through it on their own. So, I could tell a writer, just like Joe Conrath told me when he saw me going through it, he would email me and say, like, this is exactly what you need to do, and this is what you're going through, and these are the answers. And he was right about everything, and it was impossible for me to hear it. And so I wish there was some way to just tell someone, like, hey, here's the secret to not feeling that, but your body has to feel it and then kind of become inured to it. And it sucks that people have to go through that process, but they probably do. Now, the one piece of advice that I've heard that I actually got this from Michael J. Fox when he was asked about how he handles criticism. He said something that was so profound to me at the time that it really helped me get to a different level of being able to handle criticism. And I don't know if it's what he said was so insightful, or if it was just I was at a place where I needed that one extra piece of advice. But the thing that he said was, it was so simple, and it's kind of blew my mind because it didn't make sense to me at first. But the more I thought about it, I saw what he was getting at. But so Michael said, what people think about me is none of my business. And there's like a paradox there, because it seems like, wait, they're thinking something about you, so of course it's your business.
Right.
But he said it so matter-of-factly that this doesn't seem right to me, but he seems like he knows what he's talking about. So what is he saying there?
Right.
And the more you think about it, you realize it's what someone thinks about you has absolutely nothing to do with who you are, what your worth is, the decisions that you make, the way you live your life. They can't possibly know any of those things. So what they are saying about you says everything about them and absolutely nothing about you. You know about yourself. It doesn't mean you're perfect. You know your own flaws. You know the things you need to work on. You know that better than they do. But what they have to say about you has to do with how they see the world, has to do with their lens, their past experiences. And so you can start feeling sympathy for people. And it made this huge switch for me. When I saw people angry and hateful and full of negativity, I had just had nothing but sympathy for them. Like, man, I can't imagine what it's like to carry that around. And I became curious about what they were going through and more empathic. Instead of like, are these people saying something about me that's correct? Well, I don't need them to know my flaws and to want to work on myself and become a better person. Like, I don't need the criticism to have that motivation. So, that piece of advice really helped me. But I was also in a place where I really needed that piece of advice. So I don't know if that's helpful to someone who's just starting off in their career or not.
And the truth is, there's always critics, but there are also always people that are going to love what you do. And I actually wrote a blog post about that yesterday. That some people are just not going to like what you do, and that's okay. Find the people that do, and write your butt off for them. That's and that's easier in this day and age, just as it's tougher to deal with criticism, I guess, because there seems to be more of it. But perspective is everything, for sure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have some psychology working against us. It takes 20 positive comments to counter one negative, and even then, it's difficult. But game theory actually measures this, and it's pretty consistent across cultures. But we feel a loss a lot more strongly than we feel a gain. And that has consequences that reverberate through economics, and it certainly impacts creative endeavors, because in our social lives too. If there's one person at work we're not getting along with, all we think about is that person. We just dwell on it and we agonize over it. When instead, we could concentrate on the 20 people that we're getting along with really well. Well, it makes sense that our bodies are wired like that. If we lived in a small tribe where there were no strangers, you had to get along with everyone because there's only 80 of you. Your brain is wired to figure out whose relationship needs work, or who's a threat, or who's not an ally, and do whatever you can to get that person back in the fold, or to more cruelly and darkly to ostracize them or gossip about them and have them kind of cast out by your clique. So your brains are designed to figure out who's the problem in your life and solve that problem. And the more you're aware of that, the more you realize it's a vestigial trait. It's not something that we need to concentrate on anymore. And now we can realize, okay, that's what my body's trying to do. But you know what? I can also choose not to have that person in my life, or I can choose to, instead of being competitive with them, to just shower them with love and see what happens there. And this gets back to the whole wayfinding concept, is to understand what our bodies were meant for and how that doesn't apply to the modern world, and then to choose a different solution than the one that we evolved, or if you believe we were created, the one that we were given.
And speaking of wayfinding, and you mentioned earlier your boat, the Wayfinder, how did this decision come about that you're going to build this boat and set sail? And if you've been following Hugh on Facebook, you've seen him, with this couple of suitcases, and that's everything he owns in the world, and about to he's in South Africa about to board this boat and set sail. What is some of that journey?
Man, that goes back way farther than my writing career. I was in high school when I read Joshua Slocum's Sailing Around the World Alone, and I grew up sailing a little sunfish as a kid, and just my happiest moments every summer was on that boat in the Sound at Figure 8 Island Beach. And so when I went off to college at the College of Charleston, I bought a sailboat to live on, and when I dropped out of school, I sailed down to the Bahamas, and I was going to try to sail around the world, but I had too much fun in the Bahamas. Spent a year there, went through a couple of hurricanes, started doing odd jobs in other people's boats. It led to a whole career as a yacht captain, but I never gave up that dream. Even when I met my last girlfriend, we had I let her know, like, hey, I can do this whole domestic thing for a while, but like my ambition is to sail around the world one day, and I'm saving up for that. And that was part of living simply and saving my money and not owning much, is knowing that I was going to move on to a boat eventually, and I didn't want to have a lot of stuff to have to get rid of. And I wanted to save up as much money as possible to be able to afford a boat and to go travel for 5 years. And I just assumed I would come back from that trip completely broke and have to start over again. So this has been something I've been working toward for over 20 years. The writing career was just something that kind of came in the middle of that while I was settled down and enjoying time with a girlfriend. And, it's basically all that changed really was the quality of the boat that I'm going to be doing the trip on. Everything else is the same. I've been doing this no matter what. So people who've known me through my writing think like that it's some kind of midlife crisis. People who have been my friends forever, they're wondering what took me so long. I've got friends that we had this dream when I was living in Charleston, and 2 of my friends are already in the South Pacific. They left a couple years ago. And another, my friend, is got his boat ready, and he's starting to do his sea trials around Charleston. So this is something, we've all been working toward for a long time, and it has absolutely nothing to do with my writing career. It's just, I don't know. I was never going to get famous for wanting to live on a boat and sail around the world. So that's not what I was going to get known for outside of my immediate family and friends. But people know me as a writer, and that's not how I conceive of myself. So that's pretty odd. People still come up to me like, "Oh, you're this great writer." I'm like, I'm a reader who likes to make up his own stories, but who I am is completely divorced from that. That's something I've done for 6 years. I'm 40 years old. I'm a lot more than something I've been doing for half a dozen years.
Absolutely. Will you continue to write when you're on the Wayfinder?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to keep writing my travelogue adventures for one, but I imagine I've got so many stories that I want to tell. You've got plenty of time and less internet connection, so just in the last few months, my productivity has been higher than it was while I was touring and doing book conferences and things like that. So I think this will be good for my writing.
Yeah. So, are you planning to go sail around the world? Do you have a designated route, and is this something you've been planning out?
Yeah, I'm going to go about it kind of like I do with my my writing. I've got a general outline, but I'm also leave a lot of room for pantsing as well. So yeah, the vague goal is to sail around the world, but if I'm having a good time in some place and feel like I've found a home and I don't ever feel like leaving, then I won't leave. I'll be able to write wherever I am, and I'll form friendships and bonds wherever I go, and just kind of let the weather and the social events in my life kind of dictate where I'm going to be.
That's awesome. We began our conversation talking about Beacon 23, and you just released the 5th part about a week ago. Would you like to talk about where the story came from? And did you see it as a 5-part series, or was this a short that then evolved kind of like Wool did?
No, this one I had planned out actually when I commissioned the cover art from Michael Corley. I gave him the subtitle for each one. I had the plot of each story laid out. Also submitted it to the Kindle Singles program, and they don't really do serials because they want each work to stand alone, and so I had to explain the overall plot for each piece. And this was before I'd finished writing the first one, so I needed to have it all organized ahead of time. The story idea, it's a confluence of several things. I've always been fascinated with lighthouses since I was a little kid, going to Hatteras and then later as a sailor. I've been very ungrounded the last 6 months between getting rid of my home and kind of living on the road until I get on the boat. So that stateless feeling like was something I could really embody with this character. And then, a lot of my work has dealt with PTSD, something that I suffered a mild case of after 9/11. And so I was able to get a kind of autobiographical, but also write about themes that are important to me and write about a setting that I've been fascinated with since I was very young. So all those things kind of came together.
And the lighthouse, especially in that first story, there's a painting. Is it a painting or a photo?
That's a photograph.
It's a photograph. I wanted to say that, but it didn't sound right. Is that a real photograph, or is that something you imagined?
No, it's a real photograph. There's it's a pretty amazing history behind this photograph because it's a spectacular shot. This massive wave crashing over a lighthouse off the coast of England, I believe, or France, maybe. I think France. And this lighthouse operator sitting outside having a smoke, and he looks so nonchalant while this wave of Armageddon is crashing over the lighthouse around him. And I've always been struck by that photograph and how calm and heroic and amazing this guy seemed in this shot. And when I found out the true story behind that photograph, that it was basically the story is a lot different than what that scene captures. It makes me think about how we're remembered. And maybe this comes partly, too, from moving back onto a boat and people thinking of me as a writer when that's such a small glimpse of my life. My life has been much more about boating and living on the water than it has been about writing. So maybe subconsciously that played into it. But, how we're remembered has to do with when people see us or what they choose to remember about us more than it is our actual life and our challenges and the things that we overcome and the decisions that we make. And, that's just a nature of living a shared experience, and there's something kind of tragic about that. So that was definitely something I wanted to explore, something that I felt when I saw this photograph, fell in love with it, and then found out the true story behind it.
And the culmination of the story, and without giving spoilers, is about hard decisions, and then the fallout of those hard decisions, and kind of how we choose to see the world and how we choose to respond to things in the world. Did current events and situations in the world kind of play into that part of the subplot?
9/11 did for me. I was at ground zero when all that was going down and had as much reason to want vengeance as anybody. And I don't know. I just felt I've always felt that the price of freedom is that we're going to be attacked, not that we earn our freedom by vanquishing the people who attack us. Trying to, I had to get the owner I was working for, the boat owner, his parents were up on a sport fish in New York at the time, and I need to get them back to Florida, so I took them down in their sport fish, and I was on one of the first flights out of Florida back to New York, and I saw guys standing around the airport with M16s, and when I saw that, that's when I thought that there's a chance that we lose something really valuable here. And this was after dealing with having lost a lot of valuable stuff, and witnessing some really horrific things. But for some reason, seeing that our way of life could change permanently. And at the time, who knew? I thought it was going to look like Beirut in airports for the rest of my life. But that's when I, really was terrified that we were, going to give up our freedoms in order to protect what? Our freedoms? It seemed like this weird trade-off. And I kind of wish that we could say that this was an awful tragedy. And if we can treat it like a crime, there's a handful of people responsible for this. And if we can bring them to justice, we will. But going after an ideology and spending $1 trillion and having many more young people die fighting wars than were lost that day, it just seemed like it's like a peanut allergy where the body's reaction is the thing that ends up killing it rather than, it's this huge inflammation response, and it ends up being worse than the thing that's causing the inflammation. And so I just wish that there was some way we could handle having violence brought upon us, whether it's a bad review, something as innocuous as that, or an attack on our soil, and be able to say, this is a horrible thing. It sucks that it happened. What's the best response we can have for this that allows us to maintain our dignity and doesn't cost us more than this event has cost us? And it's hard for us to do that as individuals and as a country, because the thirst for vengeance is so great. And so, yeah, that's the theme of this series, really.
When we ought to learn to just hug it out.
Yeah, it's hard to say that.
Yeah.
It's even harder to do it. But, and I know it sounds like a bunch of hippie nonsense. I know people who are hawkish are like, nah, screw that, man. We need to go, like, bloody some noses and nuke that place until the desert turns to glass. And, like, I just I don't know what good that does to you. I understand that you can't, if you're a complete pacifist, then one guy with a knife can, like, basically rule the world, because no one would stop him.
Right.
But there's a balance there, and we need to at least have a discussion about it and search for it, and not just be gung ho about, like, I mean, and this is brought up in the story, but, like, our worship of people in the military is a little weird. Like, I have family that served in the military, and I really value people who serve, as cops, firemen, people who put themselves in harm's way for the rest of us. It's an incredible sacrifice. But the lionization of that is a little weird to me, instead of like a sad acknowledgement of, like, man, you do a difficult job and I really appreciate it. I think that's cool. But there's also this, I don't know, I can go further than that into, like, this hero worship of people who are having to do something that's really, we shouldn't want that occupation to even exist. And I wish we had more balance in that aspect of it.
Well, I hope stories like Beacon 23 will allow us to have those conversations. I think that's one of the benefits of great art, is it breaks down some of the barriers and makes it easier for us to talk about hard things. And I hope you'll keep writing things like that, because we need those cultural touchstones that allow people to take hard situations and have honest conversations about it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And so, Hugh, you're setting sail soon, right? Do you have any other works coming up that we can be watching for? And I guess you won't be blogging every day, being out in the middle of the ocean. How can people keep in touch with you and send you good thoughts and all of that good stuff?
I'll still have email, so I'll be checking that, and I think I'll be able to update Facebook and Twitter from anywhere. I might not be able to browse it or read much, but I'll be able to broadcast stuff. My next project's going to be a sequel to Sand, and then I'll be releasing more wayfinding pieces. But I'm still working on some Beacon 23 stuff. Doing edits for an omnibus edition and getting a print edition put together, and getting the audio book hired out. So still work to do there. But it's funny. I'm considering myself semi-retired just because I'm not doing the professional aspects of the publishing business anymore. But retirement will probably find me busier than I've ever been, and I'll probably be writing more than I've been writing. So stay tuned.
All right. Hugh, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and chat with me about this beautiful thing that we all get to do. And I wish you well and safe travels. And we're all going to be watching your photos and following vicariously along with you.
Cool. Thanks, Hank. I appreciate it, man.